After my family left me paralyzed in a hit and run, I spent 10 years learning to walk again. Now my brother, ex-husband, and uncle are furious I'm the star witness who just identified them as the drivers. Welcome back, family. Don't forget to hit subscribe, say hello in the comments, and share where you're tuning in from. With that said, let's jump right into the story. The headlights came from nowhere. One moment I'm crossing the intersection near my apartment, groceries in hand, thinking about the custody hearing next week. The next, metal crushing bone, my body airborne, then nothing but asphalt and agony. I remember screaming Adrian's name. My husband. He was supposed to pick me up. The car didn't stop. It accelerated. Through the haze of pain I saw it. A black SUV with a dented front bumper, the same one my brother Devon always borrowed from Uncle Ray. But that couldn't be right. My vision was blurring. The street light flickered above me as I lay there, unable to move my legs, groceries scattered like broken promises around my shattered body. The sirens came eventually. 17 minutes, the paramedics said later. 17 minutes of me lying there watching cars pass by, some slowing but none stopping. I kept trying to turn my head to see the license plate, but my neck wouldn't cooperate. My phone had skidded into a storm drain. All I could do was stare at the traffic light cycling through its colors while my blood pooled beneath me, sticky and warm against the cold pavement. Red. Yellow. Green. Red again. My legs felt like television static, buzzing with a sensation that wasn't quite pain, wasn't quite numbness. Just wrong. Everything was wrong. And somewhere in my fading consciousness I kept thinking about that SUV, about how familiar it looked, about how it seemed to hesitate for just a second before speeding away into the darkness, leaving me there to die. 3 days. That's how long I was unconscious. When I finally opened my eyes, my mother was there, dabbing at her face with a tissue. "Baby girl," she whispered, gripping my hand. "Thank God you're awake." But something in her voice sounded rehearsed, like lines from a script she'd practiced. My father stood by the window, his back to me, shoulders rigid. I tried to ask about Adrian, about why he hadn't come to get me that night, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube they'd just removed. The doctor came in, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes that couldn't hide the devastating news. "The impact severely damaged your spinal cord. T12 vertebra. There's significant trauma." I didn't understand at first. Then she said it plainly, "You may never walk again." The words hung in the sterile air like a death sentence. My mother's crying intensified, but when I looked at her, really looked, her eyes were dry. My father still hadn't turned around. "Where's Adrian?" I managed to croak. "Where's my husband?" The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father spoke without turning. "He's handling some business. You just focus on healing." But I caught something in the mirror's reflection. A look exchanged between my parents, quick and guilty, like thieves caught mid-act. My brother Devon arrived later, reeking of cologne like he was covering something else up. Whiskey maybe. Or fear. He couldn't look me in the eye. "Crazy accident, sis," he muttered, examining his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. "Real crazy. You remember anything?" The question felt loaded, weighted with something dangerous. I tried to piece together that night, but morphine kept pulling me under, drowning my memories in chemical fog before I could grab hold of them. Adrian filed for divorce 6 weeks after the accident. Didn't have the courage to tell me himself. Sent his lawyer instead, right to my hospital room where I was still learning to use a bedpan. The attorney was young, uncomfortable, shuffling papers like they were burning his hands. "Mr. Peterson feels the marriage is no longer viable given your condition and lengthy recovery prospects." Those were his actual words. Not viable. Like I was a business deal gone bad instead of the woman who'd loved Adrian since college, who'd worked 2 jobs to put him through his MBA program, who'd just found out she was pregnant 2 days before the accident. I lost the baby in the first surgery. Nobody told me for a month. They said the trauma was too much, that my body couldn't sustain the pregnancy while fighting for its own survival. When I finally asked about the cramping I'd felt before the accident, the nurse's face crumpled with pity. "Oh honey, I thought you knew. I'm so sorry." Adrian knew. He'd been told immediately and never said a word, never came to grieve with me, just started the divorce proceedings like he was discarding damaged merchandise. My mother tried to smooth it over. Baby, you have to understand. Adrian is young. He wants children, wants a wife who can give him a normal life. You can't expect him to sacrifice his future. The words felt like another car hitting me. This time I saw it coming. So I'm not worth standing by? My voice cracked like ancient pottery. She patted my hand, that same theatrical gesture. It's not about worth, sweetheart. It's about being realistic. My father sold my house, the one my grandmother left me while I was in rehabilitation. Said the medical bills were mounting, that I needed the money for care. I never saw a single statement, never signed any papers. He just did it, forged my signature and moved the equity into an account I couldn't access from my hospital bed. Uncle Ray came by on a Tuesday, unexpected and nervous. He'd been like a father to me after my own dad emotionally checked out during my teenage years. But this visit felt different. He brought flowers, white lilies, funeral flowers, and kept glancing at the door like he expected someone to burst in. "How's the memory, sweetheart?" he asked, too casual, sitting in the visitor's chair but perched on its edge like a bird ready to flee. From that night, I mean. The police still asking questions. I told him the truth. It was fragmented, pieces of a puzzle scattered across my mind. I remembered headlights, the sound of impact like thunder inside my skull, being airborne. But the details were slippery, coated in trauma's protective fog. His shoulders relaxed. That's probably for the best. Sometimes God blocks out the bad memories to protect us. Strange thing for a man who hadn't been to church in 20 years to say. Devon started visiting regularly after that, always asking the same probing questions disguised as concern. "You getting any flashbacks, sis? Sometimes head injuries cause false memories. Real vivid ones." He'd lean in close, his breath still carrying that whiskey scent. "You can't always trust what you think you remember." I noticed his hands shaking, how he'd flinch at loud noises, the dark circles under his eyes like bruises that wouldn't heal. One night I woke to voices outside my room. Adrian, Devon, and Uncle Ray, speaking in harsh whispers. I couldn't make out most of it, but I heard my name, heard "what if she remembers," heard Adrian say something about taking care of it. When I pressed the call button, they scattered like roaches when the lights come on. The nurse found me alone, confused about the visitors I insisted were just outside. She checked the hallway, came back shaking her head. "Must have been a dream, honey. No one's been here tonight." But I smelled Devon's cologne, saw 3 coffee cups in the trash that hadn't been there before. I wasn't crazy. Something was very wrong, and it centered around that night, around what I couldn't quite remember. Detective Morrison was patient, persistent, and the only person who seemed to believe me. She was in her 50s, had seen enough to recognize truth through trauma. "The hit-and-run investigation is still active," she explained during her 3rd visit. "We found paint transfer at the scene. Black automotive paint with a specific composite that matches only certain makes and models." Narrowing it down. I watched my mother's face drain of color. She'd been visiting when the detective arrived, and suddenly remembered an urgent appointment, practically running from the room. Detective Morrison noticed. She noticed everything. "Your family seems uncomfortable when I'm around. Any idea why?" I didn't want to say it. Didn't want to believe what my subconscious was screaming. But small things were adding up like math I didn't want to solve. Devon's SUV had disappeared right after the accident. Uncle Ray, who'd owned that black vehicle for years, suddenly drove a different car. Adrian had scratches on his arms he blamed on yard work. But we'd lived in a condo with no yard. "I keep having this dream," I told the detective, my voice barely above a whisper. "About the moment before impact. And in the dream I see the driver's face. But it's impossible. It can't be real." She leaned forward. "Tell me anyway." I closed my eyes, forced myself back to that moment. The headlights. The acceleration. And in the split second before impact, the streetlight illuminating the driver's face. "It looked like my brother," I whispered. "But that's crazy. Devon would never." Detective Morrison didn't say it was crazy. She wrote something in her notebook, her expression carefully neutral. "Your brother Devon. Does he have access to a black SUV?" I told her about Uncle Ray's vehicle, about how Devon borrowed it constantly, about how it had vanished. She nodded slowly. We'll look into it. In the meantime, if anyone tries to talk you out of remembering, tries to convince you your memories are wrong, I need you to call me immediately. She left me with her card and a growing sense of dread that felt like drowning. The rehabilitation center became my prison and salvation. My therapist, Angela, was a no-nonsense woman who'd worked with spinal cord injuries for 15 years. Your doctor said you'd never walk, she told me on day one. I say let's prove them wrong. But it's going to hurt worse than anything you've ever experienced. She wasn't exaggerating. Every session was agony. They'd strap me into a harness, force my useless legs to remember movements they'd forgotten. The first time I stood, supported by machinery and Angela's iron grip, I lasted 8 seconds before collapsing in screaming tears. But I came back the next day. And the next. Not because I was brave, but because I was furious. During one session, a news story played on the waiting room television. Police seek information on black SUV involved in hit and run near downtown. They showed my intersection, the skid marks still visible. My father, who'd come to support me, immediately grabbed the remote and changed the channel. No need to relive that trauma, he said quickly. Too quickly. I watched his hand shake as he pressed the buttons. Angela noticed too. After he left, she asked, "Your family doesn't want you to remember that night, do they?" I broke down, told her everything. The suspicious visits, the strange questions, the way they all seemed terrified of what might come back to me. She listened, then said something that changed everything. I had a patient once, similar situation. Family visiting but feeling wrong. Turned out they were the ones who'd hurt her in a drunk driving accident. Kept visiting to monitor what she remembered, to manipulate her recovery narrative. My blood went cold. She eventually remembered. Testified. They went to prison. Angela squeezed my hand. The body keeps the score even when the mind protects itself. Your memories will come back when you're strong enough to handle them. Until then, document everything. Write down every visitor, every strange comment. You're going to need evidence. I started keeping a journal that night, hidden under my mattress like a teenager with secrets. But these secrets could destroy what was left of my family, and part of me still hoped I was wrong, still hoped that the people I'd loved my whole life weren't capable of what my gut was screaming they'd done. It happened during a nightmare 6 months into rehab. I was back at that intersection, the headlights blinding, but this time everything was crystal clear. I could see inside the SUV. Devon driving, Adrian in the passenger seat, Uncle Ray in the back. Devon's eyes were wide, panicked, intoxicated. Adrian was yelling at him to stop, but Devon's foot stayed on the accelerator. In the split second before impact, our eyes met. My brother saw me, recognized me, and still he didn't brake. The impact came. Then Adrian screaming, "Go, go, go. Uncle Ray, she's not getting up. We need to leave. Now." Devon sobbing, "That was my sister. Oh God, that was my sister." And they drove away. I woke up screaming so loud the night nurse came running. But this wasn't a dream. This was memory, sharp and terrible and undeniable, cutting through the protective fog like a knife. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking so violently I could barely dial. Detective Morrison answered on the second ring. "I remember everything," I gasped. It was them. All 3 of them. They hit me and left me there to die. The detective went silent, then, "I need you to stay calm. I'm coming to you right now. Don't tell anyone about this memory. No one. Do you understand?" I understood. I understood that my family had tried to murder me. Maybe not intentionally. Devon had been drunk, it was supposed to be an accident. But leaving me there, that was a choice. Coming to the hospital afterwards, pretending to care while secretly monitoring whether I'd remember their faces, that was calculated. Filing for divorce, selling my house, isolating me, that was covering their tracks. Every visit, every fake tear, every expression of love had been a lie wrapped in self-preservation. The rage that filled me was physical, burning through my veins like acid. I'd spent 6 months breaking my body to relearn how to stand, how to take a single step, how to exist in this new reality. And the whole time, the people who'd put me in this wheelchair were coming to my room, holding my hand, telling me they loved me while secretly praying I'd never remember what they'd done. Detective Morrison brought the district attorney with her. They needed my official statement, needed every detail I could remember. I told them everything, watching their expressions shift from professional neutrality to barely concealed disgust. "We found the SUV," Detective Morrison revealed. "Your uncle reported it stolen 3 days after your accident, but he waited 72 hours to file the report. Red flag. We impounded it from a chop shop, but the front end had been completely replaced. Amateur work though. They left evidence." The DA, a stern woman named Patricia Reeves, laid out what would happen next. "We'll arrest all 3 on charges of vehicular assault, hit and run causing serious bodily injury, and conspiracy. The leaving the scene charge alone carries significant prison time. With your testimony, we can prove they knew they'd hit someone and made a conscious choice to flee." I felt sick and vindicated in equal measure. What about my parents? They've been helping cover this up. Patricia's expression hardened. "We're investigating that angle. At minimum, obstruction of justice. Your father forging documents, your mother's interference with the investigation. It adds up." They arrested Devon first. I watched it on the news from my hospital bed, saw him being led out of his apartment in handcuffs, trying to hide his face from cameras. The reporter said, "Police have arrested a suspect in the 10-month-old hit and run that left a local woman paralyzed. Sources say the suspect is the victim's own brother." My phone exploded with calls from my mother. I didn't answer. Adrian was arrested at his office. Very public, very humiliating. Uncle Ray tried to run. They caught him 2 states away, heading for the Canadian border with $50,000 in cash. The bail hearing was where I saw them all together for the first time since I'd remembered. I'd insisted on attending despite my doctor's concerns. Angela wheeled me in and I felt every eye in that courtroom turn to me. Devon looked like he'd aged a decade. Adrian wouldn't meet my gaze. Uncle Ray stared at me with something that looked like hatred, like I was the villain in this story for having the audacity to survive and remember. The prosecutor argued they were flight risks, danger to the witness. Devon's lawyer, paid for by my father, argued that this was a tragic accident, and his client had been living with devastating guilt. I couldn't stay quiet. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge looked surprised but nodded. I wheeled myself forward, my voice steady despite the rage trembling through my body. "Tragic accident," I repeated, my voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "That's what they're calling it. But an accident is when you hit someone and immediately call 911, render aid, try to save their life. What happened to me was attempted murder followed by 10 months of psychological torture." I looked directly at Devon. "You saw my face. We made eye contact. You knew it was your sister on that crosswalk and you chose to hit the gas instead of the brake. Then you left me bleeding on the pavement like garbage." His lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved her silent. "Let her speak." I turned to Adrian. "You filed for divorce while I was learning to use a bedpan. Didn't tell me I'd lost our baby. Just erased me like I'd never mattered, all while you knew why I was in that hospital bed. Because you were there. You watched it happen and told my brother to run." Adrian's face crumpled. Finally, some genuine emotion. "And Uncle Ray," I looked at the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd walked me down the aisle when my father was too drunk. "You helped destroy the evidence. Reported the vehicle stolen days later, after you'd had time to partially dismantle it. You came to my hospital room bringing funeral flowers, asking if I remembered, praying I wouldn't." The courtroom was absolutely still. "Your Honor, these men didn't just hit me with a vehicle. They've spent 10 months trying to run me over again, emotionally and psychologically. They attended every major rehab milestone, pretending to support me while secretly terrified I'd remember. They manipulated my parents into helping cover their tracks. They sold my house without permission to pay for the lawyers who are standing here calling this an accident." I felt tears streaming down my face, but my voice never wavered. "I have spent 312 days learning to stand again. Every single one of those days I thought my family loved me. I thought the reason they couldn't look at me was because they were heartbroken about my condition. I gave them grace. I forgave their absence, their awkwardness, their strange behavior. Because I loved them. I wiped my eyes. But they weren't heartbroken. They were guilty. And instead of confessing, instead of showing me the basic human decency of the truth, they let me suffer. They watched me cry myself to sleep, watched me fight through agony in physical therapy, watched me lose everything. My marriage, my home, my ability to walk, my baby, and said nothing. The judge was leaning forward now, his expression grave. These men don't deserve bail. They deserve exactly what they gave me that night. To be left alone in the dark, wondering if anyone cares whether they survive. The trial began 8 months later. By then I'd progressed to using a walker for short distances, each step a victory and a reminder of what they'd stolen. The media dubbed it the family betrayal trial, and the courthouse steps became a circus. Camera crews, protesters with signs reading "Justice for Jasmine." My name spread everywhere, my face on every news channel. The prosecution's case was devastating. They had the SUV evidence, paint transfer matching my clothes, blood spatter patterns in the undercarriage that Devon's botched cleaning hadn't fully removed. They had cell phone records proving all 3 men were together that night. They had testimony from the chop shop owner who'd been offered $5,000 to make the vehicle disappear. And they had me. Taking the stand was the hardest thing I'd ever done, harder than learning to walk, harder than accepting that my family had tried to erase me. The defense attorneys circled like sharks. Devon's lawyer, a sharp woman named Cassidy Mills, tried to paint me as confused, traumatized, my memories unreliable. "Isn't it true you were unconscious for 3 days after the accident?" she asked. "Yes. And isn't it possible that during that time, your brain constructed false memories to explain the trauma?" I looked at the jury. My brain didn't construct the paint evidence. It didn't construct the phone records. It didn't construct the 3 men panicking at my bedside asking if I remembered. My memory was confirmed by physical evidence. Cassidy switched tactics. "You were angry at your brother for borrowing money he never repaid, weren't you? You resented Adrian for his success while you worked low-paying jobs." I stayed calm, though my hands gripped the walker so tightly my knuckles went white. I loved my brother. I supported my husband through graduate school. Yes, there were tensions in every relationship. That doesn't mean I'd fabricate being run over. She pressed harder. "You admitted to being on pain medication during the months these memories supposedly came back. Isn't it possible?" "What's possible," I interrupted, "is that 3 grown men got drunk, hit a woman, their sister, their wife, and instead of doing the right thing they prioritized their own freedom over her life. What's possible is that they've been lying for over a year and a half while I fought to survive." The prosecutor, a brilliant man named David Reed, was gentler during redirect. "Tell the jury what that night took from you." I took a breath. "Everything. My mobility, my marriage, my home, my child. My sense of safety. My ability to trust the people I love." The prosecution called Angela, my physical therapist, who testified about my injuries, the magnitude of recovery, the lifetime of challenges ahead. "Her spinal cord injury is permanent. She'll never have full function. The fact that she can walk short distances with assistance is extraordinary and a testament to her determination, not to any minimal nature of the injury." She also testified about my mental state during therapy. There were times she'd break down, saying she wished she'd died that night because the pain of betrayal hurt worse than the physical injuries. She trusted these men. Loved them. They watched her suffer and said nothing. Devon's girlfriend Maya took the stand. She was young, scared, clearly pressured by prosecutors. But her testimony was damning. The night it happened, Devon came home after midnight, drunk and hysterical. He kept saying, "I killed her, I killed my sister." I thought he was being dramatic. He made me promise not to tell anyone he'd been drinking. Under cross-examination she revealed more. The next few months he'd have nightmares, wake up screaming. Adrian came over a lot. They'd lock themselves in the garage, have intense conversations. Once I overheard Devon saying, "What if she remembers our faces?" And Adrian said, "She won't. But if she does, we'll deal with it." The most shocking testimony came from an unlikely source, my mother. The prosecution had offered her immunity in exchange for truthful testimony. She looked 20 years older as she took the stand, couldn't look at me. The night of the accident, Ray called me around 10 p.m. Said there'd been an incident that Devon had borrowed his car and got into a hit and run. He didn't tell me who they'd hit until the next morning when the police called about my daughter. Her voice broke. I knew. The whole time I knew it was them. But Devon is my son, Ray is my brother, and Adrian, well, he'd already decided to leave, and I thought maybe if Jasmine never remembered we could all just move forward. The courtroom erupted. The judge gavelled for order. My mother continued through tears. I convinced myself it was an accident, that they panicked, that they didn't mean to hurt her. I told my husband to sell her house so she wouldn't have resources to investigate. I visited the hospital to monitor what she remembered. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I felt Angela's hand on my shoulder. I was shaking, crying, unable to process that my own mother had chosen her son over her daughter, had actively worked to cover up the crime that destroyed my life. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman was a black woman around my mother's age, and her expression was stone. In the case of Devon Williams on the charge of vehicular assault while intoxicated, we find the defendant guilty. Devon's head dropped. His lawyer squeezed his shoulder. On the charge of leaving the scene of an accident causing serious bodily injury, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, we find the defendant guilty. Adrian's trial was next. Similar charges, similar verdict. Guilty across the board. Uncle Ray, facing the most serious charges because he'd orchestrated the cover-up, received guilty verdicts that would put him away for decades. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern man named Howard Wells, addressed each defendant individually. To Devon, you were given the gift of family, of a sister who loved you unconditionally. While intoxicated, you made the catastrophic decision to drive. When you hit your sister, you had a choice: render aid or flee. You chose cowardice. You then spent over a year maintaining that cowardice, watching her suffer, manipulating her recovery. I sentence you to 12 years in state prison. Devon sobbed. His lawyer had argued for leniency, first-time offender, genuine remorse. The judge wasn't moved. To Adrian, you were this woman's husband. You took vows. In her darkest hour, you abandoned her and helped conceal the crime that put her in that wheelchair. You filed for divorce while she learned to feed herself again. I sentence you to 10 years in state prison and permanent revocation of your MBA and professional licenses. Adrian looked like he might vomit. To Uncle Ray, you are the most culpable. You owned the vehicle. You helped destroy evidence. You coordinated the cover-up. You visited your niece in the hospital not to support her but to manipulate her. I sentence you to 18 years in state prison. The judge then turned to me. Ms. Williams, I cannot give you back what was taken. I cannot restore your mobility, your marriage, your sense of safety. But I can tell you this. Your courage in pursuing justice despite overwhelming pressure from your own family to remain silent has been extraordinary. These men will face consequences. It's a small measure of justice, but it's something. I was granted permission to read a victim impact statement. I'd been preparing it for weeks, but standing there, actually standing, gripping my walker, looking at the men who'd shattered my life, the words came from a deeper place. I spent the first year after the accident believing I was unlucky, I began, my voice carrying through the silent courtroom. I thought I was the victim of a random act of violence, that some drunk stranger had stolen my future. I grieved for my legs, my marriage, my baby. I grieved for the life I'd planned. But I held on to hope because I had family. I had people who loved me. I looked at each of them. Then I remembered. And I realized my grief had been misdirected. I wasn't the victim of a stranger. I was the victim of the people who were supposed to protect me. You didn't just steal my ability to walk. You stole my ability to trust, to believe in love, to feel safe in the world. My mother was crying in the gallery. I turned to her. You chose him over me. Every day you chose his freedom over my truth. You held my hand while lying to my face. That's a betrayal I'll carry forever. Back to Devon. You were my little brother. I raised you when Dad was too drunk. I paid for your community college classes. I believed in you. And you left me in the street like I was nothing. To Adrian, we lost a baby. Our baby. And you mourned in silence, alone without me while filing paperwork to erase me from your life. That's not just cruelty. That's evil. To Uncle Ray, you taught me that family protects family. You were right. I'm just sorry you didn't believe your own lesson. I paused, gathering strength for the final words. But here's what you didn't count on: I survived. Not just the accident, but your abandonment, your lies, your betrayal. I learned to stand again, literally and figuratively. I will walk out of this courtroom on my own legs, shaky, imperfect, but mine. I will rebuild a life without any of you. I will find people who deserve my trust. Tears streamed freely now. The saddest part is that I still love you. All of you. That's the cruelest part of family betrayal. The love doesn't just die because they hurt you. It lingers like a phantom limb, aching for something that's gone forever. I'll carry that ache for the rest of my life. But I'll carry it standing. The judge thanked me. I turned my walker, took my time navigating to the exit. Each step was agony. My legs burned, my back screamed, my arms trembled from supporting my weight. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Behind me I heard Devon's voice, broken and desperate. Sis, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I kept walking. Angela met me at the door, her eyes wet with tears. You did it. You're done. I shook my head. No. I'm just beginning. Outside the courthouse, news cameras swarmed. I gave a brief statement. Justice was served today, but it doesn't erase what was taken. I hope my story reminds others that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth fighting for. Family should be your safe place. When it isn't, you have every right to walk away, even if you have to relearn how to walk to do it. 3 years later, I'm living in a small apartment across town. I work remotely as a victim advocate, helping others navigate the trauma of violent crimes. I'm dating a wonderful man named Christopher who I met in a support group. He's patient with my limitations, celebrates my victories, never makes me feel less than. I still use the walker for longer distances. Some days are harder than others. But I'm here. I'm standing. I'm surviving. My mother writes from time to time. I don't respond. Devon sent letters from prison that I burned without reading. Adrian's sister reached out to apologize for her brother's behavior. That correspondence I keep, a reminder that not all family ties are poisoned. The settlement from my civil suit against all 3 defendants and Uncle Ray's insurance means I'll never have to worry about medical bills again. Money doesn't heal trauma, but security helps. Mostly, I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about integrating the pain into your story without letting it write your ending. They tried to kill me, maybe accidentally, maybe not, but they definitely tried to bury the truth. They failed. I am the witness who survived. I am the voice that refused to be silenced. And every single day I wake up, every step I take, every breath I draw is an act of defiance against the people who bet I wouldn't make it. I made it. Scarred, changed, but here. And that, after everything, is enough. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible even after unthinkable betrayal. Drop a comment below about how this story affected you. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who need it. Remember, truth always finds a way to the surface, and you are stronger than the worst thing that ever happened to you. Until next time, stay strong.